The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Highway 29 as Maya Rodriguez walked the familiar route to her part-time job at Rosie's Diner, the crumpled $5 bill in her jeans. Pocket seemed to burn against her leg with each step a constant reminder of the decision she'd been wrestling with for weeks. That $5 represented 3 weeks of saved tips, carefully hoarded quarters and singles that she'd resisted spending on anything frivolous. It was meant for Tommy's birthday present. Her 8-year-old brother who'd been dropping hints about a new action figure he'd seen at the dollar store. The same brother who'd been sleeping in her bed most nights lately, waking up from nightmares about their father's raised voice echoing through their thin apartment walls before he'd finally left for good. 6 months ago, Maya paused at the intersection of Highway 29 and Oak Street, the same corner where old Mr. Henderson had set up his makeshift animal rescue operation behind the abandoned Texaco station. She'd been avoiding this route for the past 3 days, ever since she'd first seen the cardboard sign propped against a weathered wooden crate that simply read, "Injured dog, $5 or best offer." The rational part of her mind, the part that had been forced to grow up too quickly when her father left and her mother started working double shifts at the textile factory, told her to keep walking. They could barely afford groceries, let alone veterinary bills for a stray animal. Their landlord, Mr. Kowalski, had already threatened eviction twice this year when the rent was late, and their apartment's no-pets policy was strictly enforced, but something about that sign had been haunting her dreams. Maybe it was the way the letters were carefully written in black marker, each one formed with the deliberate precision of someone who wanted to make sure every word was legible. Maybe it was the thought of an injured animal waiting in a box, unwanted and unloved, while people walked by with their eyes averted. Or maybe it was the $5 in her pocket that seemed to grow heavier with each passing day, as if the universe was trying to tell her something she wasn't ready to hear, today. However, Maya found her feet carrying her toward the old gas station before her mind could object. The late October air carried the scent of dying leaves and the faint smell of motor oil that never quite left. The abandoned lot. Mr. Henderson sat on an overturned milk crate beside the cardboard sign, his weathered hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of coffee that steamed in the cool morning air. He was somewhere in his 70s, with silver hair that stuck out from beneath a faded baseball cap, and kind eyes that seemed to hold the weight of many difficult decisions. "Morning, Mr. Henderson," Maya called out, her voice catching slightly. As she approached, she'd known him peripherally for years. He was the kind of man who showed up at every community event, helped neighbors with their yard work without being asked, and somehow always had exact change when the Girl Scouts came around selling cookies. Her mother had mentioned once that he'd lost his wife 2 years ago and had been spending his retirement rescuing stray animals as a way to cope with the loneliness. "Morning, Maya," he replied, his voice carrying the gentle warmth that had made him a favorite among the neighborhood. "Children, didn't expect to see you here today. Usually you're rushing off to work about this time." Maya's eyes drifted to the large cardboard box beside him, where she could see the outline of a large dog lying motionless beneath an old army blanket. Only the very tip of a black nose and part of a tan-colored muzzle were visible, and even from several feet away she could see the shallow rise and fall of labored breathing. "Is that him?" she asked, nodding toward the box. "The dog from the sign?" Mr. Henderson's expression grew somber as he stood up slowly, his joints protesting. "The movement. That's him, all right. Found him 3 days ago, right there on the side of Highway 29, about half a mile down from the truck stop. Somebody must have dumped him, probably figured he wasn't worth the trouble anymore." His voice carried a mixture of anger and sadness. That made Maya's chest tighten. "Poor thing's been through hell, that's for sure." Maya knelt beside the box, her heart hammering as she got her first clear look at the German Shepherd. He was a shadow of what the breed should be, his once proud frame reduced to a collection of sharp angles and protruding bones. His coat, which should have been thick and lustrous, was matted with dirt and what looked like dried blood. His left hind leg was wrapped in strips of torn fabric that might have once been a t-shirt, and the makeshift bandage was stained with seepage from wounds that were clearly infected. One of his ears was partially torn, the jagged edge suggesting it had been caught on something sharp, and his dark eyes held a mixture of pain and resignation that made Maya's throat constrict with unshed tears, despite his condition. Something about the dog's bearing suggested nobility. Even lying on his side in a cardboard box, there was a dignity to the way he held his head, a sense that he had once been cherished and well cared for. His dark eyes, though dulled by pain and exhaustion, still held flecks of intelligence that seemed to assess everything around him with careful attention. "What happened to him?" Maya whispered, her fingers hovering just above the dog's head. Afraid to touch and cause more pain. Mr. Henderson sat back down heavily on his milk crate, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he reached for his coffee. "Best I can figure, he belonged to someone once. He's got some training, doesn't snap or growl even when he's hurting. Somebody taught him manners, taught him to trust people. But look at these wounds, Maya. This isn't just neglect. Somebody hurt this animal deliberately, probably over a long period of time. The leg's been broken for weeks, maybe months, and it's healed all wrong because nobody bothered to get him proper medical care." The old man's voice grew thick with emotion as he continued. "I've been doing this for 2 years now, ever since Martha passed, and I've seen a lot of animals in bad shape. But this one this one breaks my heart. He still tries to wag his tail when I talk to him, still looks at me like he's hoping I might be the person who's finally going to make everything okay." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes as she looked down at the German shepherd. As if sensing her attention, he lifted his head slightly, and their eyes met for the first time. In that moment, something passed between them that Maya couldn't have explained if she'd tried. It wasn't just sympathy or pity. It was recognition. She saw in his eyes the same resignation she'd felt when her father walked out, the same careful hope she'd learned to suppress when her mother promised things would get better. She saw a survivor, someone who'd learned to endure because giving up wasn't an option. "Have you tried the animal shelters?" Maya asked, though she already knew the answer. The county shelter had been overcrowded for months, and the no-kill rescue organizations had waiting lists that stretched for weeks. Mr. Henderson shook his head sadly. "Called every shelter within 50 miles. They're all full up, and the ones that aren't, well, they took one look at his medical needs and said he'd be better off being put down. Said it would be kinder than letting him suffer." His voice cracked slightly. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm being selfish keeping him alive when he's in so much pain. But every time I look at him, I see something that wants to fight, wants to live. I can't give up on him if he hasn't given up on himself." Maya understood that feeling more than she cared to admit. She'd felt it herself during the worst nights after her father left, when her mother would cry herself to sleep and Tommy would crawl into her bed, asking why Daddy didn't love them anymore. The desire to give up had been there, whispering that it would be easier to stop trying, stop hoping, stop believing that things could get better. But something inside her had refused to surrender, the same something she now recognized in the German shepherd's eyes. "How much do you think the medical bills would be?" she asked, her hand moving almost involuntarily to the $5 bill in her pocket. Mr. Henderson looked at her with surprise and something that might have been hope. "Maya, honey, I appreciate what you're thinking, but this dog needs serious medical attention. We're talking about surgery on that leg, antibiotics for the infections, probably weeks of recovery time. Even if Dr. Martinez gave you a discount, we're looking at hundreds of dollars, maybe more." Maya knew he was right. Dr. Martinez ran the only veterinary clinic within 20 miles. And while he was known for his kindness and his willingness to work with families who couldn't afford full payment up front, he still had bills to pay and a business to run. Hundreds of dollars might as well have been thousands as far as Maya's family was concerned. Her mother's paychecks from the textile factory barely covered rent and groceries, and Maya's tips from the diner went toward school supplies for Tommy and the occasional luxury like a new pair of shoes when the old ones wore through. But as Maya looked down at the German shepherd, she found herself thinking about choices and chances. She thought about the action figure Tommy wanted, about the birthday cake she'd planned to buy from the grocery store bakery, about all the small disappointments that made up their daily life. Then she thought about the look in the dog's eyes, about the way he tried to lift his head despite his pain, about the faint movement of his tail that suggested hope wasn't entirely dead. "What's his name?" Maya asked quietly, her decision crystallizing even as she spoke. "Don't know," Mr. Henderson replied. "No collar, no tags. But he looks like he's been somebody's faithful companion once upon a time. You can see it in the way he responds to kindness, the way he tries to please even when he's suffering." Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled $5 bill, smoothing it carefully between her fingers. It wasn't much, she knew that. It wouldn't cover the medical bills or guarantee a happy ending, but it was what she had, and sometimes what you have is enough to start something bigger than yourself. "I'd like to take him," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I know $5 isn't much, but it's all I have right now. I'll figure out the rest somehow." Mr. Henderson stared at her for a long moment, his weathered face cycling through surprise, concern, and finally a deep respect. "Maya, are you sure about this? This isn't like taking in a healthy puppy. This dog is going to need constant care, expensive medical treatment, and there's no guarantee he'll ever be completely healthy again. Your mother works so hard already, and I know things have been tough since your father left." Maya nodded, understanding the weight of what she was taking on. "I'm sure," she said, and meant it. "I can't explain it, but I feel like maybe we're supposed to find each other. Maybe he needs someone who understands what it's like to be broken but not beaten." The old man's eyes grew misty as he accepted the $5 bill from Maya's outstretched hand. "You know what, honey? I think you might be right. Sometimes the best healing happens when two wounded souls take care of each other." Maya carefully lifted the German Shepherd from his cardboard box, surprised by how heavy he was despite his malnourished appearance. He was bigger than she'd expected, probably close to 80 pounds when healthy, though he felt like he'd lost at least 20 pounds from his ideal weight. As she lifted him, he made a soft whimpering sound but didn't struggle or try to bite, confirming Mr. Henderson's assessment that he'd been well trained once upon a time. "Easy, boy," Maya whispered, adjusting her grip to support his injured leg. "We're going to take care of you now. I don't know how yet, but we're going to figure it out together." The walk home was the longest 2 miles of Maya's life. She had to stop every few hundred yards to rest, not just because the dog was heavy, but because she could feel him trembling with pain and exhaustion. Each time she paused, she would stroke his head gently and whisper reassurances, promising him that they were almost home, that everything was going to be okay. Whether she was trying to convince him or herself, she wasn't entirely sure. By the time Maya reached the narrow steps leading up to their second-floor apartment, her arms were shaking from the effort of carrying the German Shepherd, and both of them were breathing heavily. She fumbled with her keys, trying to unlock the door while still supporting the dog's weight, when the door suddenly swung open to reveal her mother. Elena Rodriguez, still in her factory uniform and looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past. 6 months. Elena took one look at her daughter standing in the doorway with a half-dead German Shepherd in her arms, and her face cycled through a range of emotions that would have been comical under different circumstances. Surprise gave way to concern, concern to exasperation, and finally, exasperation to the kind of weary resignation that comes from being a single mother trying to hold everything together with sheer willpower and determination. "Maya Rosa Rodriguez?" Elena said, using her daughter's full name in the tone that had once made Maya's father straighten his shoulders and pay attention. "Please tell me you did not spend your brother's birthday money on a stray dog." Maya felt tears spring to her eyes, not from her mother's tone, but from the weight of everything she was feeling in that moment. The physical exhaustion of carrying the dog, the emotional toll of seeing such suffering, the fear that she'd made a terrible mistake, and the desperate hope that somehow, someway, this would all work out. "Mama, I know how this looks," Maya began, her voice shaking. "I know we can't afford this. I know Mr. Kowalski doesn't allow pets. I know Tommy's birthday is next week and now I don't have money for his present. But I couldn't leave him there, Mama. He was dying and nobody wanted him, and I just thought I couldn't walk away. Elena looked down at the German shepherd in her daughter's arms, taking in the infected wounds, the makeshift bandages, the way the animal's ribs showed through his matted coat. For a moment, Maya was afraid her mother was going to order her to take the dog back where she found him. Elena Rodriguez was a practical woman who'd learned to make hard choices when life demanded them. She'd married young, worked multiple jobs to support her family, and endured years of her husband's drinking and unpredictable temper before finally finding the courage to ask him to leave. She knew the difference between wants and needs, between dreams and reality, but as Elena looked at the dog, she saw something that made her pause. Despite his terrible condition, there was something noble about the way he held himself, something that spoke of loyalty and courage. More importantly, she saw the expression on her daughter's face, the fierce protectiveness that reminded her of herself at 16, when she'd first held Maya as a newborn and promised to give her everything. She needed to succeed in life. Elena sighed deeply, stepping aside to let Maya enter the apartment. "Bring him in," she said quietly. "We'll call Dr. Martinez and see what he says. But Maya, you need to understand that this is going to be difficult. If we do this, if we really commit to helping this dog, it's going to mean sacrifices. Real sacrifices." Maya nodded, carrying the German shepherd into their small living room and carefully laying him on the old couch that had seen better days. "I know, Mama. I'll work extra shifts at the diner. I'll do whatever it takes. I promise you won't regret this." Elena knelt beside the couch, her experienced hands gently examining the dog's wounds with the same careful attention she'd once given to Maya and Tommy's childhood injuries. The German shepherd watched her with careful eyes, his tail giving the faintest wag when she spoke to him in the same soothing tone she'd used with her children. "What are you going to call him?" Elena asked, her practical nature already shifting into problem-solving mode. Maya looked down at the German shepherd, taking in his dignified bearing despite his terrible condition, the way he seemed to carry himself with quiet strength even in his weakest moment. "Atlas," she said without hesitation. "I'm going to call him Atlas because he looks like he's been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders." Elena smiled for the first time in weeks, recognizing in her daughter's choice a wisdom that went beyond her 16 years. "Atlas," she repeated, testing the name. "It suits him. Now, let's call Dr. Martinez and see if he can come take a look at our new family member." As Elena went to make the phone call, Maya sat beside Atlas on the couch, carefully stroking his head and whispering promises she hoped she'd be able to keep. She told him about their apartment, about Tommy who would love having a dog to play with, about the park down the street where they could walk once he was feeling better. She told him about second chances and new beginnings, about how sometimes the most broken things could become the most beautiful once they were given the love and care they deserved. Atlas listened to every word, his dark eyes never leaving her face, and Maya felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time since her father had walked out, she felt like she had a purpose beyond just surviving each day. She had someone who needed her, someone who depended on her, someone who would love her unconditionally if she could just find a way to save his life. The afternoon sunlight streamed through their small living room window, casting golden shadows across the couch where Maya sat with Atlas. And for just a moment, the future felt full of possibility instead of fear. She didn't know how they were going to afford the medical bills, didn't know how they were going to hide a large dog from their landlord, didn't know if Atlas would even survive the night. But she knew that some decisions were made with the heart instead of the head, and that sometimes the most important things in life came disguised as impossible choices. As she sat there with Atlas, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing and the warmth of his body against her side, Maya understood that she'd just made the most important decision of her young life. She'd chosen hope over fear, love over practicality, faith over logic. And whatever happened next, she knew she'd never regret the moment she decided that a broken German shepherd and a crumpled $5 bill were worth betting her heart on.